Stop overthinking everything. Quiet your racing mind, break free from anxious thought loops, silence your inner critic, and reclaim the inner peace you deserve. By Aurelia Voss. Introduction. The year is 170 AD. The air along the Danube River is cold enough to bite through wool. Inside a small dark tent, a man sits at a wooden desk. Outside, the world is falling apart. A brutal war is raging against northern tribes. A plague is sweeping through the Roman Empire, killing thousands of people every day. The man at the desk is Marcus Aurelius. He is the emperor of Rome, the most powerful person on the planet. He has every reason to be terrified. He has every reason to stay awake all night, pacing the floor and worrying about the future of his people. Instead, he picks up a pen. He isn't writing a speech for the public or a law for the Senate. He is writing to himself. He is trying to figure out how to keep his mind quiet when the world is screaming. He writes about the fact that most of the things we worry about don't actually exist outside of our own heads. He tells himself that he has power over his mind, even if he has no power over the war or the plague. These private notes would eventually become a book called Meditations. It is one of the most famous books ever written about finding peace. Marcus Aurelius discovered a secret that many of us are still trying to learn today. The biggest battle you will ever fight is the one happening between your ears. The 3 a.m. radio. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years. The setting has changed, but the struggle is exactly the same. Imagine a woman named Elena. It is 11:45 p.m. in her home office in Seattle. The room is quiet, except for the hum of her laptop. Elena is a senior marketing manager at a big tech firm. She is smart, successful, and respected. But right now she is staring at a grocery list with 4 items on it, and she is completely stuck. She can't decide if she should buy organic tomatoes or the regular ones. If she buys the regular ones, is she being cheap with her health? If she buys the organic ones, is she wasting money that should go into her savings? While she stares at the list, another thought pushes its way in. Her boss sent a message on Slack at 9 a.m. that said, "Got a minute to chat tomorrow?" Elena has spent the last 14 hours re-watching every interaction she had with her boss over the past week. She is looking for a tone in that one-sentence message. She wonders if she made a mistake in the big presentation on Tuesday. Maybe her boss noticed she was nervous. Maybe that nervous energy made her look like she didn't know what she was talking about. By the time 1 a.m. rolls around, Elena hasn't picked a tomato, and she has convinced herself she might be getting fired. This is the internal radio. It's a station that plays worst-case scenarios on a loop, 24 hours a day. It's the feeling of being a cognitive prisoner. You aren't trapped in a jail cell made of iron bars, you are trapped in a jail cell made of what-ifs. You feel like you are running on a mental treadmill. You are moving as fast as you can, sweating and gasping for air, but when you look around, you realize you haven't moved an inch. You are still in the same room, facing the same problems, only now you are much more tired. The epidemic of analysis. If you feel like Elena, you are not alone. We are living through what experts call an epidemic of analysis. A recent study by Gallup found that global anxiety levels are at an all-time high. We have more information than any humans in history, but having more information hasn't made us feel more secure. In fact, it has done the opposite. There is a famous idea called the paradox of choice. It suggests that when we have too many options, we don't feel free. We feel paralyzed. We worry that by picking path A, we are missing out on something better on path B, so we stand at the fork in the road and study the dirt for hours, days, or even years. We think that if we just analyze the problem enough, we can prevent anything bad from ever happening. We tell ourselves, if I think about this meeting from every angle, I won't say anything stupid. If I check the weather for my vacation 10 times a day, I can make sure nothing goes wrong. If I replay that awkward conversation in my head, I can figure out how to fix it. But here is the hard truth. Thinking about a problem is not the same thing as solving a problem. Most of the time, overthinking is just a way of trying to control a world that is fundamentally uncertain. We use our thoughts like a shield, hoping they will protect us from the pain of making a mistake. But that shield is heavy. It's exhausting to carry. Eventually, the weight of the shield starts to hurt more than the thing we were afraid of in the first place. The Promise of a Quiet Mind. This book is not about learning how to never have a bad thought again. That is impossible. Your brain is a machine designed to produce thoughts, just like your heart is a machine designed to pump blood. You can't tell your brain to stop thinking any more than you can tell your heart to stop beating. What you can do, however, is change your relationship with those thoughts. You can learn to be the decisive realist. This is a person who knows that their mind is a powerful tool, but refuses to let that tool become their master. By the time you finish these chapters, you will have a toolkit of cognitive filters to help you. Turn off the internal radio when it starts playing the worst-case scenario hits. Make choices quickly, from what to eat for dinner to whether or not to change your career, without the agony of second-guessing. Stop rewatching the past. You will learn how to leave social interactions at the door, instead of bringing them into your bed at night. Stay present. You will learn how to actually taste your food and hear what your friends are saying, because you won't be somewhere else in your head. Silence the inner critic. You will learn how to treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a friend. This isn't just a collection of positive thinking tips. This approach is backed by the experiences of people who had to keep their heads clear when the stakes were as high as they get. We will look at how Charles Darwin dealt with the physical sickness caused by his own racing mind. We will see how Olympic gymnast Simone Biles handled a mental short circuit in front of the entire world. We will follow the steps of Navy SEALs who use simple breathing tricks to stay calm when things go wrong. Meeting Elena. To help see how these tools work in the real world, we are going to follow Elena Rodriguez. As we saw, Elena is 34 years old and living in Seattle. She is a classic high achiever. She is the person everyone turns to when they need something done right. But Elena has a secret. She is exhausted by her own brain. Her war room, which is what she calls her ergonomic home office, is where she spends hours drafting 3-sentence emails. She deletes and rewrites them until the clock hits midnight. She is currently facing the biggest decision of her life. She and her husband, Mark, are talking about having children. Mark is ready. He thinks they will figure it out as they go. But Elena is paralyzed. She has started a spreadsheet to track the career trajectory of women who have kids versus those who don't. She worries that a child will ruin the life she has worked so hard to build. She worries that if she doesn't have a child, she will regret it forever. She is looking for a 100% correct answer that doesn't exist. Elena believes that if she thinks about it enough, she can find a way to guarantee a happy ending. She doesn't realize yet that her overthinking is the very thing keeping her from being happy right now. Throughout this book, we will watch Elena try these techniques. We will be there when she fails, and we will be there when she finally finds her way out of the loop. The road ahead. The journey from a racing mind to a quiet one happens in stages. We have to understand why our brains do this to us before we can make them stop. In the first part of this book, we are going to look at the biology of the racing mind. We will talk about your caveman brain and why it thinks a snarky comment from a coworker is just as dangerous as a hungry lion. We will explore the default mode network, the part of your brain that creates stories about who you are and what people think of you. Next, we will look at the 7 signs of overanalyzing. You will be able to identify exactly which flavor of overthinking you struggle with most. Are you a reassurance seeker who can't buy a shirt without texting 3 friends? Or are you a fortune teller who is already worrying about a problem that might happen in 5 years? Then, we will get into the practical tools. We will cover the 5-minute toolkit for immediate relief when you feel a spiral starting, the 40-70th rule for making decisions without needing all the facts. The sanctuary principle, for setting up your physical environment to help your mind stay quiet. The inner citadel, a mental fortress that helps you stay resilient when life gets messy. We are also going to deal with the ghost at the banquet. This is that nagging voice of the inner critic that shows up just when things are going well. We will learn how to give that voice a name, thank it for trying to help, and then tell it to sit in the corner so you can enjoy your life. A new way of being. Overthinking is not a personality trait. It is not just who you are. It is a habit, and like any habit, it can be broken. You were not born with a racing mind. If you look at a child playing in a sandbox, they aren't worrying about whether they are building the perfect sandcastle. They aren't wondering if the other kids in the sandbox think their bucket is the wrong color. They are just there. They are present. That version of you still exists. It's just buried under years of what-ifs and should-haves. The goal of this book is to help you dig that person out. You deserve to have a mind that is a pleasant place to live. You deserve to go to sleep without a to-do list scrolling behind your eyelids. You deserve to make a mistake and not hate yourself for it for the next 3 weeks. The emperor in his tent and the marketing manager in her office are both looking for the same thing, inner peace. It is not something you find by thinking harder. It is something you find by learning when to stop thinking and start living. The treadmill is running, and it's set to a high speed. You're tired and your legs are sore. But the good news is that the stop button is right in front of you. You just have to reach out and press it. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Why do we think our way into a corner? Charles Darwin leaned over the side of the HMS Beagle and felt his stomach turn for the 1000th time. It was 1831, and the young man was far from the quiet English countryside he called home. He was supposed to be a man of science, a calm observer of birds and rocks. Instead, he was a vibrating mess of nerves. He called his condition the horribles. It wasn't just the waves making him sick. It was a deep, bone-shaking anxiety that followed him from the tip of South America to the tiny islands of the Galapagos. His heart would race for no reason. His skin would break out in itchy red spots. He spent hours every night staring at the wooden ceiling of his cabin, replaying every conversation he had with the ship's captain. Did he say the wrong thing? Did he sound foolish? Was his entire life's work going to be a giant mistake? Darwin was caught in a trap that didn't involve nets or cages. He was caught in the corner of his own mind. We often think of Darwin as a genius who sat under a tree and figured out the secrets of life. We picture him as a calm old man with a long white beard. But the truth is that Darwin was a world-class overthinker. He didn't just think about his ideas, he worried them to death. He spent 20 years sitting on his discoveries because he was terrified of what people would think. His brain was constantly scanning for danger, even when he was sitting in a cozy chair with a cup of tea. The myth of the smart worrier. There is a common belief that overthinking is a sign of a high IQ. We tell ourselves that if we think about a problem from 50 different angles, we are being thorough or prepared. We believe that the more we worry, the more we care. This is a myth. In reality, overthinking is rarely about solving a problem. It is about trying to control a future that hasn't happened yet, or change a past that is already gone. Darwin believed that if he could just anticipate every possible criticism of his work, he could protect himself from being laughed at. He thought his racing mind was a tool for safety. But all it did was make his hair fall out and his stomach ache. He was using a high-powered engine to drive in circles. He wasn't getting anywhere, he was just burning fuel and wearing out the tires. When you find yourself replaying a conversation at 2 a.m., you aren't being analytical. You are trapped on a mental treadmill. The treadmill moves fast, and it makes you sweat, but it doesn't take you a single inch forward. You are doing a lot of work, but you aren't making any progress. Your brain thinks it is helping you stay safe, but it is actually keeping you stuck. The smoke detector in your head. To understand why a genius like Darwin could be paralyzed by the horribles, we have to look at how the human brain was built. Your brain has one main job: to keep you alive. It doesn't care if you are happy. It doesn't care if you are calm. It only cares that you aren't eaten by a tiger or kicked out of your tribe. Deep inside your brain is a tiny almond-shaped part called the amygdala. This is your caveman brain. It is like a smoke detector that is always turned on. In the ancient world, this smoke detector saved our lives. If a bush rustled, the caveman brain yelled, "Lion," and you ran. It didn't matter if it was just the wind. If you ran from the wind, you were just a little tired. If you didn't run from a lion, you were lunch. Evolution decided it was better to have a smoke detector that was way too sensitive than one that didn't go off at all. This is called the smoke detector principle. It is better to have 10 false alarms than to miss one real fire. The problem is that we don't live in the ancient world anymore. There are no lions in your office. There are no tigers in your kitchen. But your caveman brain doesn't know that. When your boss sends a message that says, "Can we talk later?" your internal smoke detector goes off. It doesn't smell a campfire, it smells a life-threatening emergency. Your heart starts to pound. Your breathing gets shallow. You start to think of every possible thing you could have done wrong in the last 6 months. Your brain is reacting to a social threat exactly the same way it would react to a physical predator. To your amygdala, a bad tone in a Slack message is the same thing as a sharpened spear. This is why you can't just relax. Your body thinks you are in a fight for your life. Elena's morning meeting. Elena Rodriguez sat in her ergonomic chair in her Seattle office, feeling exactly like Darwin on the Beagle. Her palms were damp, and she could feel a dull throb behind her eyes. She was in a meeting with the tech firm's top leaders. It was a simple check-in, the kind she had done 100 times before. "Elena," her boss said, leaning back, "what's your quick opinion on the new campaign? Do you think the less is more approach is working?" This was a simple question. Elena had been working on this campaign for months. She knew the data better than anyone. But as she opened her mouth, her caveman brain took over. "If I say it's working and it fails, they'll think I'm incompetent," one thought whispered. "If I say it's not working, I'll look like I'm not a team player," another thought shouted. "What if I sound too aggressive? What if I sound too soft? What if they can see my hand shaking?" Elena's heart rate spiked. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Instead of giving her honest, expert opinion, she took a deep breath and gave a very safe, very vague answer. "I think there are pros and cons to both sides, and we should probably look at more data before we make a final call." Her boss nodded and moved on. Elena felt a brief wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a heavy cloud of guilt. She knew she had played it safe. She knew she hadn't really helped. For the next 3 hours, she replayed those 30 seconds in her head. She imagined her boss thinking she was indecisive. She imagined her coworkers talking about how she choked. Elena was on the mental treadmill. She was trying to solve the problem of her boss's opinion by thinking about it more. But there was no problem to solve. The meeting was over. The words were spoken. By overthinking, she wasn't preparing for the next meeting, she was just ruining her afternoon. She was reacting to an intellectual threat as if it were a predator, and her body was paying the price. The conflict of two brains. We are all walking around with a massive internal conflict. On one side, we have the prefrontal cortex. This is the new brain. It is the part that does math, makes plans, and understands logic. This is the part of Elena that knew the campaign data. This is the part of Darwin that understood natural selection. On the other side, we have the amygdala, the old brain. It only knows fear, anger, and survival. It is much faster than the new brain. It reacts in milliseconds. When you overthink, your old brain has hijacked your new brain. It takes all that wonderful thinking power and forces it to work on one task, finding danger. Your new brain is like a powerful search engine. If the old brain types in reasons why everyone hates me, the new brain will find 500 results in half a second. It will remember a face someone made 3 years ago. It will find a word you misspelled in an email last week. Your brain is incredibly good at finding what it is looking for. If you look for reasons to be worried, you will always find them. This is why overthinking feels like a loop. The old brain feels a spark of fear. The new brain finds a reason for that fear, which makes the old brain even more scared, which makes the new brain look for even more reasons. This is the cycle Darwin was trapped in. He wasn't just thinking about biology, he was thinking about the social cost of his ideas. He was a religious man in a religious world. He knew his theory would change everything. His old brain saw social death, being cast out of his community, and it treated that possibility like a physical death. He spent 20 years in that loop before he finally broke free. The safety bias. Your brain has a safety bias. It would much rather you be worried and safe than happy and in danger. To your brain, uncertainty is the most dangerous thing in the world. Think about it this way. If you are walking through the woods and you see a dark shape, you have two choices. You can assume it's a stump and keep walking, or you can assume it's a bear and get ready to fight. If you assume it's a stump and it's actually a bear, you're dead. If you assume it's a bear and it's actually a stump, you just feel a little silly. Overthinking is your brain's way of trying to turn uncertainty into certainty. We think that if we worry enough, we can predict the future. We think that if we analyze every what-if, we can prevent bad things from happening. We prefer the pain of worrying over the discomfort of not knowing. This is what Elena was doing in the grocery store at 11:45 p.m. She was staring at two different types of pasta, paralyzed. It wasn't about the noodles. It was about her brain's desperate need to make the perfect choice to avoid any possible future regret. Her brain was telling her that if she picked the wrong pasta, her whole night would be ruined. It sounds silly when you say it out loud, but in the moment, that feeling of "I must get this right" is incredibly heavy. Why we think our way into a corner. When we get stuck in these loops, we are essentially thinking our way into a corner. We narrow our vision until we can only see the problem. We lose sight of the big picture. We forget that in 10 years, the tone of a Slack message won't matter. We forget that most of the things we worry about never actually happen. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, dealt with this nearly 2,000 years ago. He sat in his tent on the edges of a violent war zone, surrounded by a plague that was killing his people. He had more to worry about than almost anyone in history. But he wrote to himself in his diary, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." He realized that while he couldn't control the war or the plague, he could control how much he allowed his mind to race. He knew that the primitive fears of the body were like barking dogs. If you give the dog a treat every time it barks, it will never stop. When we overthink, we are giving our anxiety a treat. We are saying, "Yes, this worry is important. Let's spend 3 hours on it." We are training our brains to be even more anxious the next time. Darwin eventually realized this too. He began to look at his own anxiety like a scientist. He didn't just feel the horribles, he started to catalog them. He noticed that his stomach hurt more when he was thinking about his book. He noticed that his heart raced when he thought about his critics. By observing his symptoms, he began to put a little bit of distance between himself and his thoughts. He wasn't the fear anymore, he was the observer of the fear. Breaking the compass. The biggest danger of overthinking is that it breaks your internal compass. You have a natural sense of what is right and what is wrong for you. Some people call it gut instinct or intuition. When your mind is quiet, this compass works very well. But overthinking is like holding a giant magnet next to that compass. The needle starts spinning wildly. You can't tell which way is north anymore, because the magnet of your worry is too strong. You start asking other people for their opinions. You look for more data. You read more reviews. You seek endless reassurance. This is what the outline calls analysis paralysis. You have so much information and so many what-ifs that you can't move at all. You are like a deer in the headlights. The deer isn't stupid, it's just overprocessing the light. Its brain is trying to figure out what that giant glowing thing is, and while it's thinking, it gets hit. To reclaim your life, you have to learn how to move the magnet away from the compass. You have to realize that your thinking isn't always helping. The resolution of the Beagle. Back on the HMS Beagle, Charles Darwin sat at his small desk. The ship was rocking, and the smell of salt and old wood was thick in the air. He felt the familiar flutter in his chest, the start of another round of the horribles. He could have spent the next 4 hours worrying about whether his latest bird specimens were labeled correctly. He could have worried about the letter he sent to his father. Instead, he picked up his pen and began to write. But he didn't write about his worries. He wrote about the physical feeling in his body. He wrote about the way his skin felt and the way his pulse jumped. He began to see that his mind was just a biological machine that was currently overreacting. He realized that his brain was trying to protect him from intellectual threats, as if they were physical predators. This insight didn't make the anxiety go away instantly, but it changed his relationship with it. He stopped seeing his overthinking as a safety net. He started seeing it as a trap. Darwin survived the voyage of the Beagle. He went on to change the world. He still struggled with anxiety for the rest of his life, but he learned a vital lesson. Your thoughts are not always your friends. Sometimes, your brain is just a very loud, very scared caveman who needs to be told to sit down and be quiet. Elena Rodriguez, in her office in Seattle, is just starting that same journey. She is beginning to see that her racing heart in a meeting isn't a sign that she is a fraud. It's just her smoke detector going off because it smelled a little bit of burnt toast. She is starting to realize that she doesn't have to follow every thought down the rabbit hole. You are not your thoughts. You are the person who hears the thoughts. Once you understand that your overthinking is just an ancient survival mechanism that has lost its way, you can start to take the steering wheel back. You can step off the treadmill. You can find the corner you've thought yourself into and simply walk back out. Darwin eventually published his great work. He faced the critics. He survived the social threats. And in the end, he found that the reality was much easier to handle than the what-ifs he had spent 20 years building in his head. The horribles were just ghosts. And ghosts, as any scientist knows, disappear when you turn on the light. Chapter 2: The Neuroscience of the Racing Mind. The baseline state of the brain is not one of rest, but of high activity. Dr. Marcus Reichel sat in his lab at Washington University in St. Louis, staring at a set of brain scans that did not make sense. It was 2001, and for years the world of science believed something that turned out to be completely wrong. They believed that when a person sat still and did nothing, their brain took a break. They thought the brain was like a light bulb. You flick the switch to off by closing your eyes and the energy fades away. But the images on Reichel's screen told a different story. He had been using PET scans to track where blood flowed in the brain, while people performed tasks like memorizing words or solving puzzles. To get a clean reading, he needed a baseline. He asked his subjects to just sit there. No talking. No puzzles. No goals. Just rest. He expected to see the brain go quiet. Instead, he saw a firestorm. Whenever the subject stopped doing something, a specific web of brain regions flared to life. It was as if a hidden engine started humming the moment the person stopped paying attention to the outside world. This network was actually using more energy than the parts of the brain used for difficult math. Reichel and his team had stumbled upon the default mode network, or the DMN. It was a discovery that changed everything we know about the human mind. It explained why, when you finally have a moment of peace, your brain suddenly starts screaming at you about a mistake you made in the 3rd grade. The storyteller in the dark. The discovery of the default mode network revealed that our brains have a factory setting. When you aren't focused on a specific task, like driving a car, chopping an onion, or reading these words, your brain defaults to a very specific type.